Right, Inspector Visalli, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sullivan.
So I want to ask you a couple of hypothetical questions. First, is your screen working?
It is, Mr. Sullivan, yes.
All right, so I'm going to draw your attention to the area at Tremont Street in Stewart where the Cure nightclub is, and it's right here at this corner, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Now, assume that a patron leaves the Cure nightclub at 2:15 a.m. Further assume that this patron is not an employee of the government. Assume this patron has not been given immunity in any respect. Assume that the Cure nightclub patron sees Aaron Hernandez here on Stewart Street at about 2:15 a.m. Do you assume all of those things, and do you recognize this to be by the side door of the W Hotel?
Oh, the mark you put right there?
Yes.
It's definitely the W Hotel, correct.
So, assume a patron sees Aaron Hernandez at 2:15 there. None of your sales site data show that Mr. Hernandez could not have been there at 2:15 a.m., correct?
No, overruled.
So,
So if Mr. Hernandez is holding a phone, using a phone at 2:15 a.m. on Stewart Street in front of the W, nothing in any of your reports indicates that that would be impossible, correct?
well, there's no, on this phone that I testified to,
Yeah, yes, and I should say,
there are no calls or text or anything that would show him being there at 2:15, no. Not this phone.
right, so this is, I should say, this is the 562 number,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So nothing you have, none of this data rules out Mr. Hernandez being at this spot at 2:15 a.m., correct?
All I can go with is, I mean, again, you have 1213 here, but all I can go with is what the phone records say and where the phone is when the mark is made with AT&T. There's no calls, between 1213 and 2:15.
Right. Now, that's another hypothetical. Assume a bouncer leaves the Cure nightclub. We said the nightclub is here at 2:28 a.m. Right. Further assume that the bouncer walks in this direction down Stewart Street. Do you have that in mind?
Okay?
If the bouncer were to say that he saw Mr. Hernandez,
Objection. It's unusual, but I don't know that it's impermissible. Overruled.
if the bouncer were to say that he saw Mr. Hernandez, where I put an H, at the corner of Stewart and Tremont at 2:28 a.m., you don't have any information, any data from the sales site data that would show that that is an impossibility, right?
The cell site data is not going to show specific actual, locationally. It's going to, like we testified to, the general area.
And you don't have anything in any of your reports, and take your time to look at them, to show that Mr. Hernandez could not have been at that corner at 2:28 a.m. Is that correct?
Again, the cell phone was somewhere in the area. What time are you saying again?
2:28 a.m.
2:28?
Yes.
No, we have a data entry, and we have a call at 2:37. The data entry is at 2:25, I believe.
Right? Now, but listen to my question. There's nothing in any of your data that would suggest that it's impossible for Mr. Hernandez to have been at that corner at 2:28 a.m., correct?
Again, with the cell phone, we couldn't tell. With records that are provided from AT&T, there's no way of specifically exactly telling where that phone would be. It's in the general area here.
Now, that's a good point. So you can't tell exactly where the phone is. Now, if I give you another hypothetical. And let's say someone says, Mr. Hernandez, at 2:28 a.m. on this date, July 16th, 2012, was in the great city of Gary, Indiana, on this 562 telephone number. You will be comfortable saying that your data suggests that that is not the case, correct?
I would.
Now, the hypothetical I'm giving you, someone says that Mr. Hernandez is standing on the corner of Stewart and Tremont in front of the W Hotel. Same question. Nothing in your data suggests that that cannot be the case, correct?
No.
Now, one method of tracking cellular phones, right now I want to pick up on what you said about that this data can't tell you exactly where anyone is. So one method of tracking cellular phones is obviously a global positioning system, or GPS, right?
Well, a global positioning system, or GPS, would be generic to the actual handset itself, okay?
Right. Well, my question is that's one method. It's not the one you use here, but that's one method, right?
On some handsets, on some models, that's correct.
Yes. If there's a GPS receiver, a phone can be tracked within a few meters of its actual place, correct?
If the person is holding it, they will get it, they themselves will have the area where they are, okay?
And you agree that GPS is the most accurate way to track a precise location of a cell phone?
Again, the cell carriers don't store where the phone was. They don't store the GPS data. They don't provide that to law enforcement, okay? They do different things with signaling type stuff, but they don't provide the actual GPS where the phone was. They don't store that as a course of business.
Okay, my question wasn't about what companies store. My question was only, do you agree that GPS is the most accurate way to track a location of a cellular phone? Do you agree with that statement?
I would agree that if you had a handset and you were outside and you were seeing satellites and the satellites put you on there and the handset, you would know your position on it.
And you also agree that your work, you're not using or relying on GPS data in this case, correct?
That's correct.
Now, another method of tracking a cellular telephone is real-time cell site data, right? Are you familiar with that?
Well, you talk about different types. What exactly? Which type do you mean?
Well, a cell phone, you agree, constantly scans a cellular network for a site with the strongest signal. That's what you told us on direct, right?
Correct.
And in a real-time cell site data method, an expert could interpret data real-time and try to figure out where a person, where the location, present location of a telephone is, right?
No, overruled.
You may.
Or telephone device, correct?
How would you use real-time cell data? I mean, I don't understand where you're going with this question.
Well,
not-
so are you unaware of that procedure using real-time cell phone data to track a telephone?
I didn't say I'm unaware of it. I'm just saying I don't understand, what type. There's various types. You explain to me which type you want me to try and explain to you, and I'll tell you.
Well, I'm asking you generally for now. Do you agree with the statement that using real-time cell site data, an expert could try to determine the present location of a cellular telephone? You think that's an accurate statement?
Objection, relevance, this is backed up.
As a general proposition, and without regard to what you did here, you may answer that question.
I mean, the phone makes a mark on the network when it makes a call or a text or makes a data entry. When the phone's on, it's communicating with the tower and a switch. That information is stored in a switch. It rolls over off a certain amount of time. That's nothing that's stored. It's you know, it's nothing that's available to law enforcement. It would be a cellular engineer would be the only person that would have access to where a phone, location of what tower phone was on. If it wasn't making a call, it'd have to be in a switch like that.
Okay, so I wasn't asking you about law enforcement's access to it, but let me just end by asking, it's not the case that your analysis employed any real-time data, correct? You used historical cell site data.
That's correct. I used what was provided via legal process from AT&T Wireless.
I want to talk to you about triangulation. You're familiar with that term, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, overruled.
I reverse, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Inspector, I asked you a question about triangulation. You recall that?
I do.
You did not answer the question, correct?
Because there was an objection made. Yes, that's correct.
Before an objection was made, you looked at Mr. Hagan, didn't you?
Correct.
Why?
Just want to make sure it's within the boundaries of.
No, you can explain what your concern is.
The U.S. Attorney's Office is permitting me to testify today,
And you looked at him before he even objected, right?
because it's borderline of whether it would be within the boundaries or not. Yes.
Oh, so you understand it to be your decision to determine what's in the boundaries or not?
Objection.
No, you may explain so the jurors understand what limitations you have
No,
in appearing in a state court.
The U.S. Attorney's Office and the U.S. Marshals Headquarters allow me to testify to my knowledge of what I do as far as interpreting cell records and things like that. Anything prospectively used in the course of, located wanted individuals, things like that, they have not allowed me to testify to that nature.
So is it your suggestion that there are certain questions that I will ask that you will just refuse to answer?
Objection.
Why don't you put a question relating to this, the scope of the work here,
Okay.
Mr. Sullivan?
So I'm going to ask you to look at me.
Okay.
all right? I'm asking the questions,
Okay.
not Mr. Hagan. Is that fair? Is that fair?
Question.
Sir, is that fair?
That's fair.
Now, I was asking you about triangulation, and I'm going to limit this to historical cell site data. Are you familiar with the term triangulation?
I am, Mr. Sullivan.
Now, it's true that a cell phone signal will often be received simultaneously by more than one site, correct?
A cell phone signal? That is correct, yes.
And particularly true when it's operating in a high density area of cell sites,
The
right?
cell phone is turned on, it's looking for a reading, it wants to use the strongest signal, strongest channel, it's sending out its identifiers on it. In this case, the MSI number is just sending it over the air and searching for the strongest tower.
When this occurs, there's a mathematical process called triangulation that can help an expert determine a location of a telephone, correct?
When it occurs, no, your phone's always on. It doesn't occur like that.
Well, you can use this method of triangulation in a couple of circumstances. One is where 3 points of receiving a site are known, hence triangulation, when 3 points are known, right?
Objection.
I'll see you at some.
So the area in downtown Boston near Cure, you would say that's a high density area, correct?
That is correct.
And it's true that in this case, in this high density area, you did not engage in a method of triangulation in order to determine more precise locations. Is that a fair statement?
I did not. That is the first statement.
Now, you're using historical cell site data to draw your conclusions, right?
Correct.
And it is true that cell site data that processes a call usually goes to the closest cell site or cell tower, right?
That is correct.
But not always, right?
That is correct.
In fact, you said it's not a perfect world, there's crossover, and for a host of other reasons, it might not go to the closest tower, correct?
There are numerous reasons, that's correct.
Now, in reviewing your report and all of your data, do you have any data that places Mr. Hernandez's telephone precisely, thank you, precisely at the corner of, it's not on this map, my apologies, but the corner of Shawmut and Harold Street at about 2:30 a.m. on July 16th, 2012?
No. Precisely? No.
Now, in terms of what factors can affect signal strength between a cell phone and a cell tower, I want to talk to you about a couple of those factors. So the number of sites available could affect which site a phone pings on, correct?
A number of sites available?
Yes, in a high-density area.
Yeah, I mean, the network's built, so usually the closest tower would be the one. There's capacity issues, there's other issues like that, yes.
Well, other issues, maintenance or repair, for example,
Maintenance or repair, yes.
the height of the cell tower,
Topography, heights, yes.
wattage output,
Correct,
range of coverage.
correct.
So when you say usually, just to be clear, usually doesn't mean always, right?
Doesn't mean always.
And there are some technical characteristics of the antennas that can also affect signal strength. Is that a fair statement?
In some cases.
Such as the number of antennas, for example?
Well, I mean, it depends. In some cases, yes.
The angle and direction of antennas?
The angle and direction would absolutely, would actually, we went over the azimuth, that would absolutely, be pertinent to this, what you're saying is.
And then there are geographic factors, right?
That's correct.
Weather, yeah.
Well, not so much weather as like buildings, topography, stuff like that, brick.
Whether phone is being used indoor or outdoor
Correct.
could help. All right. So here in Boston, at around 2:30 a.m., according to the data that you have and that you have collected in your analysis, you would say that it is not, I'm sorry, you would say that the claim that Mr. Hernandez was standing at this corner, Tremont and Stewart, at 2:30 a.m. is not excluded by the data that you have, correct?
Not included or excluded, yes, sir.
Now, I have just a couple more questions in terms of Boston. I was very curious listening to your direct. Do you have any information about the whereabouts of an Alexander Sherrod Bradley's cell phone on July 16th, 2012 at 2 in the morning?
I do not.
And you don't, because the Commonwealth never gave you cell phone data for Alexander Sherrod Bradley, correct?
Correct.
So you can make no claims whatsoever with respect to Alexander Bradley's whereabouts on 7/16/12, correct?
I personally cannot, no, sir.
All right. I want to ask you a couple questions about Florida. So you recognize this 203 number as being a number associated with Mr. Hernandez, right?
That is correct.
So, so I'm showing you one of your slides, and you have the blue cell site where the cursor is, and then I really don't know the primary colors. What color is this?
It looks like red or somewhere in between red and purple.
Okay, so the reddish purple cell site here. Now, so the La Quinta Inn and Suites in West Palm Beach, why did you add that here?
Why did I add that?
Yeah.
Because through the investigation, we learned that Mr. Hernandez had stayed there that night.
All right. And what time through the investigation were you made aware of the shooting in West Palm Beach?
Shooting West Palm Beach.
Yes.
Off the top of my head, I don't recall, but I think it was somewhere after somewhere around 6 o'clock or something like that, maybe.
If I said 6:40-ish, does that sound familiar?
I wouldn't, if you say it, I mean, I would probably agree with it, yes.
All right. I say Mr. Hernandez is not guilty. You agree?
Objection.
I said it, right. So 6:40-ish, so let's say between 6:30 and 7 a.m. On February 13th, 2013. Do you have that period in mind?
I do.
All right. It is true, is it not, that nothing in your data would preclude Mr. Hernandez from being in bed at La Quinta Inn and Suites in West Palm Beach Airport with his cell phone to his ear, correct?
His cell phone is off, so I wouldn't know, we wouldn't know where he is at that period of time.
Well, it's not my question. I'll do it again this way. This is based on all your data. So if I said, let's assume that Mr. Hernandez was in Boise, Idaho at 6:30 a.m. on the 13th of February, 2013, you would say that your data analysis indicates otherwise, right?
Well, it would be my opinion that at 12:19, when the phone went off, it was here, and when it came on at 7:42, it was here. And my opinion would be that nobody could get to Boise, Idaho and back in that quick. So I would definitely say, you know, based on what I know about this, that he wouldn't be in Boise, Idaho.
And you can make a similar opinion with respect to this 6:30 to 7 o'clock time frame, right? You can say that the possibility of him being in La Quinta is not excluded in the way it's excluded for him being in Boise, Idaho,
I could say that.
right? I guess. Yep. Yep. Sir, do you know what a Luddite is?
A what?
A Luddite.
A Luddite?
Yes. Is somebody wholly unfamiliar with technology, so my apologies. I am a Luddite. So now I've moved to the 404 number.
Okay.
Yeah. So this number is not Mr. Hernandez's number, correct?
That is correct.
Now, this number, when you testified on direct, you showed a few areas, but one area, here it is. One area was this 3635 fiscal court area, correct?
That's correct.
And this is, to your understanding, where Mr. Bradley was shot, right?
Correct.
Now, you weren't suggesting with this 404 number that this had anything to do with the location of Mr. Hernandez's cell phone, right?
I'm suggesting where the 404 number was at the time.
Right, but this is not Mr. Hernandez's number, right?
This is not Mr. Hernandez's number, no.
Right, and you don't have any data, suggesting Mr. Hernandez's cell phone was here at 6:47 or so a.m., right?
The only data I have shows Mr. Hernandez's phone was off at that time.
Now, the La Quinta in the fiscal court, these locations are within a few miles of each other, maybe 5 miles, right?
Correct.
And it is not outside of the realm of possibility that the pings could hit on either of these cell sites, right?
Yeah, well, generally, we probably expect it to hit that tower, or, that tower here, right here, if you were at the La Quinta.
Right, but it could do this one, it could do this one or this one, right?
Correct.
Now back to Mr. Hernandez's phone. You told us there's a period of time when the phone was off or no cell service or battery dead, but it did not register with any of the cell sites, correct?
Correct.
You recall what time period that was?
I believe it was 12:19 p.m. To 7:42 a.m.
So during that time period, you can make no claim whatsoever about the location of Mr. Hernandez's cell phone.
I cannot.
Except Boise, Idaho.
Except Boise, Idaho. Or we can't forget Gary, Indiana. Brief indulgence. Almost done. You do have some data hits from Mr. Hernandez's telephone, right?
Correct.
And what did you conclude from the data hits?
Which ones? There's a lot of them.
This period where you can't make a claim about his location. I'm looking for it now. Here we are. So you've got some data hits at, looks like at 128, 139, 228, right?
Yeah, those are going to be those packet gateways that are signaling the phone.
And so your testimony is that some of the data hits are good and some we should ignore?
We should ignore the packet ones and use the other ones, the support node ones, the ones we put the phone, we progressively see where the phone's at.
I'm going to show you some on the 17th. And while I'm queuing up what I'm looking for, in this period from 12 to 7, where you don't have voice and text data, you would agree that other evidence of Mr. Hernandez's whereabouts would be useful.
I don't understand the question.
So in other words, if you don't have the cell phone data, but you have credit card receipts or his driver's license run, other extrinsic evidence, you would agree that that would be good evidence of his whereabouts at a certain time, correct?
Correct.
And looking here, 213, 7:54 a.m. data, this 203 number, 6 minutes, 24 seconds, mobile data. Now, what do you make of this data entry?
That data was 6 minutes and 24 seconds. Appears to be actually somebody using data on the phone for 6 minutes and 24 seconds. Appears to be the support node GPRS switch, not the paging gateway.
And what is it about this data? When you say it appears to be gateway, let's look at 9:34 a.m. Mobile data. Is this gateway to your thinking?
Actually, let me see. Nope, it's the same tower. It appears to be the tower it's on right there at the time.
So
It has text and voice basically on both sides of it. So it would more than likely be actually the tower that's issuing the IP address to the device.
all right, so you admit that you are drawing some inferences about which data is good and which data is bad by using some of the surrounding entries, right?
Absolutely.
There's nothing intrinsic about the entry itself that tells you that the phone is not actually in the location that the data ping suggests, right?
What tell me it's in the area. I mean, I see the data sandwiched in between, a voice and a text. So it's on that tower. I can basically look at it and say, yeah, that's, going to be on the same tower.
No, understood. But when I say nothing intrinsic about that line itself, 213, 934 data and so forth, just looking at that.
Yeah, just looking at it directly like that, they won't make a mark. No, there's no notation directly that would say that. Correct.
No notation. So when you and or your team decided to say that some of the data hits were wrong and others were right, it was nothing about the entry itself, notwithstanding anything around it, that led you to that conclusion, correct?
Conclusion made was consistent with looking at the records and the knowledge of how the phone works, and that's what led us to that conclusion, yes.
All right, so you made decisions to include some of the data entries in your analysis with respect to the phone location, right?
Correct.
And you made a decision to exclude some of the data entries with respect to your location conclusions.
The ones that appear accurate, we included, and the ones that weren't, we made note of so that the jury would know.
And do they appear accurate because they're consistent with the government's theory in this case?
Appear accurate because it's what I do. I read this stuff, and I've used this for years, and I know a phone can't be in two places at once.
That is true. Phone cannot be in two places at once, but you will admit that reading this data is suggestive that the data entries suggest that the phone is in two places at once, right?
Well, on the original 562 number we looked at, absolutely. Again, later on in this where the phone is out of Miami, it's being paged again by Miami. What's in the air heading to Dallas is being paged out of the switch in Miami again.
And you felt that because you know a phone cannot physically be in two places at one time, at least some of the data is unreliable. That would be a fair statement, right?
At least some of the data is unreliable would be a fair statement.
Brief indulgence, Your Honor. Oh, did you prepare these slides?
In conjunction with Rob Satana from the District Attorney's Office, correct.
And when you say in conjunction with, what does that mean?
We sat together in a room. We looked it over. He actually did the work, and I, helped him plot all the towers and everything.
And when's the last time that you made an edit on this?
When was the last time I made an edit on
Yes,
it?
personally.
I didn't personally make any edits on it.
None.
Rob made all the edits at my direction.
So, did you direct some edits at around 11 o'clock last night?
I did not.
Right. Were you aware that we received new slides, updated slides about 11 o'clock last night?
No, overruled.
I did not.
And so what we're looking at right now, you can't say with certitude that you approved whatever changes were between the last iteration and this iteration.
I didn't approve or not approve. I reviewed it and looked at for its accuracy. We talked yesterday afternoon and reviewed it all again and reviewed it again this morning.
All right, but sometime last night you didn't approve any edits to this.
I did not.
No further questions.
Is there any redirect?
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's far enough for today. The next witness likely would not conclude in a short order. So we'll resume tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Between now and then, please don't discuss this case. Don't read, hear, or see anything about this case. Don't attempt to learn anything about this.